Hello, lovelies. Joshy and Jonny are back from the warp. Hey, Jonny.
Oh, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you, busy boy?
Oh, it's been a hell of a first week at a new job, you know.
Yeah, so I've heard.
How things with you?
Good. I have been building up the remainder of a 2,000-point Sisters army. Something I've built pretty much in like 2-ish months. Don't talk about the painting.
Hey, we'll get there.
That's pretty cool. After this recording, we're gonna go test out some new lists. We're gonna go play a game of Warhammer, aren't we, Jonny?
We sure are. I'm gonna bring some spice.
Yeah. What are you gonna play?
Oh, I'm gonna be bringing my whip project, aka Thousand Suns.
Okay. What are you bringing?
Oh, boyo. We have Ahriman himself, because he is the best thing at this points level, frankly.
Yeah.
With 4 squads of rubrics, a couple of sorcerers, a Ghazghkull Terminator squad led by a sorcerer in Terminator armor, a couple of tanks, and some Zangor shaman, and Enlightened running around.
Okay. That is a little spicy, not gonna lie.
It'll be fun.
I'm readying up a 1k penitent host-ish list to go up against one of our new friends who's only at 1,000 points. Do I think it's good? No. I'm bringing all the things that people like, maybe not that one.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm bringing 1,000 points. What do I got? I got 3 mortifiers, ran as individuals with mixed loadouts, heavy bolters, saws, flails, all of the stuff, flamers. I've got a squad of Repentia, a 5-girl squad that's going to be riding around in an immolator. I got a Castigator battle tank, got Paragon warsuits I'll probably keep in reserve. I've got a Ministorum priest to lead the Repentia, and I've also got a Palatine with an enhancement that gives her unit the Penitent keyword.
Yep.
And I'm going to slap her in with some Celestian Sacrosands. So they're going to be a unit of Penitents. A lot of the Penitent host stratagems will allow them to have feel no pains and crits on 5s. Yeah, good fun.
Our poor new player.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can push through the death.
Thought about that. I've thought about that. Gotta go hard, gotta go fast before we all get too sick.
That's it. And Death Guard are coming.
Before we get into today's actual episode, our notes. We, once again, are going to tell you that we have an Instagram, TTP Field Manual. We're going to be posting, we released an episode kind of updates. We're going to be posting hobby whip if we can figure out a good photography setup. We're going to do memes. I don't know about that last one, but you get where I'm going with it. As well, book club. We are reading Fulgrim, Horus Heresy Book 5. According to my notes here, should probably be doing that sometime in the next week or 2. How are you enjoying Fulgrim? Have you finished it?
I have finished it.
Oh, I haven't. Give me a non-spoiler 15-second review to hype me up to finish it.
Second half of the book, real good. Get through that first slog and you are pretty safe. And oh boy, what a final couple of chapters. Hot damn.
Okay. I'm just getting past the chapters where the EC go into a bit of a scrap with Craft World Ulthway.
Ah, yes.
But no more spoilers than that until the episode.
So look forward to that in the future.
Yeah! What are we talking about today, my friend?
Geddon.
Getting on with it.
Getting around to Armageddon.
We're getting around to Armageddon, yeah. We're going to do maybe the first in a mini-series, not week after week, gods, no. But a little mini-series of the Warzones of Warhammer 40k. Starting with one of my personal favorites, A for Armageddon. Right? What do you know about Armageddon, my friend?
It's where all the big stuff happened.
Kind of.
They built a whole system around Geddon.
Oh, do you not know the secret origins of Armageddon?
The secret origins? Obviously not, because it's a secret.
Okay, so you're going to be in for a treat for that. How many wars for Armageddon do you think there have been?
I think we're coming up to the 4th War of Armageddon.
Bingo. What's the 4th war for Armageddon? Why would we bother talking about Armageddon, Johnny?
Because, spoiler alert, nah, jokes, not really, we're getting a new Crusade supplement focused around Armageddon once again. We thought it would be a good idea to find out what the hell happened in the first 3 wars.
It would be a good idea. From what I can tell, the first War of Armageddon is a bit more of a lore piece. I think it was in maybe a novel. I'm not 100% sure. The second and possibly the third War for Armageddon was done back in the 3rd edition of the game as one of those ongoing campaign regions. Like, here's a war. Here are the forces in this war. Here are some missions you can play and, determine the tide of the war yourselves. There's been a few of those over the centuries of the 40k setting and the IRL decades.
Yeah, game been going on for a while.
Yeah, Armageddon's probably one of the most popular for reasons we'll get into. But I think we should just jump in to the secret beginnings of Armageddon, hey?
Let's do it.
So as I said, you have a couple of wars for Armageddon that are a bit more a stage for actual campaigns for players, and the war itself typically doesn't have a very clean resolution in the lore. Armageddon has such a reputation that over the years of lore writing for this setting, it has a funky sort of bit of lore going on around the campaign, which I enjoy. Armageddon, Johnny, used to have a different name.
Yeah.
What do you think about the word Ulanor?
Hey, I've heard of that place.
Have you?
Yeah. They've mentioned it a few times in the Horus Heresy novels.
You're so turned on. It's great. Yeah. We have to go. Before we understand Armageddon, we have to go and understand Ulanor.
Oh no. I've been curious about that in recent times, so I'm kind of excited.
Like, what happened to Ulanor?
Yeah.
What is Ulanor?
Why do they keep talking about it in the past tense?
Well, in the Horus Heresy, Ulanor was kind of the thing that happened just before the saga takes off. When the Great Crusade was still kind of at its peak, you had all the 2018 Space Marine legions doing their things. Everyone was reunited with their chapters, Primarchs I'm talking about. Towards the tail end of the 200-ish years of the Great Crusade, where mankind set out once again from the Sol system to go reconquer the galaxy, Ulanor, at this time in the history, was the site of a massive orc empire. And it took the combined efforts of Horus, G-Man, and the Khan to actually crack this planet. Not crack it, they just dealt with the orcs.
Yeah.
You had the Ultramarines and the White Scars fighting through these various huge orc civilization, places. Orcs, if left alone too long, do start to, in their own way, colonize worlds and turn them into these big, kind of orcish Cadia, the whole planet's a fortress kind of deal. But the massive orc empire was abruptly ended when Horus and Abaddon and their besties went for the spearhead approach, went up the biggest tower. They slew war boss Erlak Uruk and his bodyguard, with Horus himself throwing the orc overlord off of the tower. This very grim image really broke the morale of the orcs, and Ulanor was conquered.
Nice.
But that would not be the end of Ulanor. No, this would be a great time for the Emperor to go, hey, everyone's doing a great job. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. I'm retiring. Horus is in charge.
I can imagine not many people were too happy about that appointment.
Well, the whole Ulanor thing was a grand spectacle, Johnny. The Emperor declared a triumph would occur, a big ceremonial procession. Do you know the statistics of the triumph? of Ulanor.
Is this going to be one of those things where Warhammer forgets to math, right? And forgets its scale?
I think this might be a moment where the scale's actually a bit like, oh my god.
Okay. Are we talking billions?
I think you're going for a different kind of math.
Okay.
The Mechanicus utilized geoformer engines and millions of servitors, slaves, and tech thralls to flatten an entire continent, laying a mirror-smooth granite path that was supposedly 5 kilometers wide and 500 kilometers long, decorated along the entire length with orc skulls.
That's impressive.
Yeah, at the end of the road, a citadel was constructed to hold the Primarchs, of which over half were in attendance, the only time that happened. As well, the Emperor himself was there, Malkador was there, Constantine Valdor was there. The citadel itself was guarded by 2 gold-plated warlord-class titans, as well the Custodians and the Sisters of Silence. After this massive triumph, the Emperor's like, all right, Horus is in charge. I'm going home. Bye.
Wow, okay, alright.
What do you think of that?
Daddy just up and abandoned everyone.
You know why he did that, right?
I do. But from their perspective, Daddy just up and abandoned everyone.
Sure did.
Kind of makes sense why things ended up the way they did. There was not really much of an explanation as to his movements, which makes people question why.
You're very correct. The procession of this part of Ulanor was used once again within the this time in the histories during the Horus Heresy. At the very end of the 7-year conflict, I think after the Battle of, I want to say Molech, Corbirum. After that, before the traitors would amass and head through the warp towards Terra, the majority of the traitor Primarchs decided to be a bit ironic and have like their own twisted dark version of the original triumph, with all of their traitorous forces going down the road once more. And at the very end of the triumph, each legion in attendance sacrificed 1/10 of all of their slaves to the chaos deities so that they would have a nice, safe, easy trip.
Oh, damn.
Hot damn.
See, Chaos just does everything better.
Yeah, more or less. But Ulanor would then kind of be abandoned after that. You know, it's a bit chaos icky now. Which takes us then 1,500 years later. Have you heard of the orc warlord known as the Beast?
No. Unless he has another name.
So Saga of the Beast was one of an earlier in the Black Library kind of sagas. There was, I think, somewhere between 6 and 9 books. It had every book's done by a different author style.
Yep.
And it detailed this conflict in the early 32nd-ish millennium, if I can math right, where the Imperium was almost done for because of an orc empire led by the Beast. Just simply a title given to the person. So after a lot of complacency, after complacency and neglect, an orc war boss simply named the Beast claimed Ulanor, rapidly urbanizing the entire planet in orky formats, the Beast claiming the location of the original citadel built for the Imperium to be his seat, a city he now named Ghazghkull, because by this point, Ulanor has such orky aura that the Beast and his followers are like, we want that one. I sense the orc, right?
Yep.
Now, with the whole planet being constructed into this orky thing, he made of the citadel, if it was still there, I'm not sure, to be a giant temple-sized gargant, like the Stomper, like a temple-sized one of that.
Nice.
And then began to convert the entire planet into a battle station prototype orc attack moon.
Far out, dude.
For whatever reason.
Orcs are hilarious.
For whatever reason, the attack moon. Now, I'm not 100% sure of which of these is the truth. Either the planet of Ulanor, now an attack moon, began to move towards Terra, or if it was kind of like the base and smaller like asteroids and stuff like that were used to go towards Terra. But something orky and large was headed as an attack moon towards Terra. It was grim. Nothing could stop this thing. By this point, most of the Imperial Primarchs had either gone for a coma or disappeared or died. So the Imperium's like,
How do we deal with this problem?
hell, who would appear, Jonny, to rally the Imperial forces? You get 3 guesses.
It's the Imperial Guard with the claw hand.
Commissar Yarrick will be in the story later, but he wasn't in the 32nd Millennia War of the Beast.
Okay, alright.
I like where you're at, though.
Constantine Valdor? No, he wouldn't have left Earth.
That is a good guess, but it's not the correct guess.
I have no idea.
Would you believe me if I said Vulcan?
Oh, okay.
Vulcan appears. Now, this whole saga was written before the Horus Heresy's, like, modern thing was done.
Yeah, I was thinking he was dead at this point.
Yeah, this was before the whole Siege of Terra stuff and whatever goes on there, that they wrote this story.
Yeah.
Whatever Vulcan's fate is in the Heresy, it's known that he is a perpetual, a person that can't stay dead forever. He rematerializes like a ghost you can't banish. That's his shtick. I don't know if you knew that, but that's his shtick.
Yeah.
Every Primarch has a psychic gift or some sort of supernatural warpish ability, and that's Vulcan's.
But it's also like something some humans just have.
Thanks, Dan Abnett.
Right.
So Vulcan appears to lead the new invasion of Ulanor, which is an incredibly urbanized brawl because of all the orky cities. Vulcan himself sacrifices himself to slay the beast. He goes into the Gargant temple thingy and is brawling with the orcs and kind of plunges himself as a portable nuke into the sort of core of the Temple Gargant, and it blows up.
Alright.
However, several other prime orcs or beasts would rise up over and over again, with the Imperial forces eventually resorting to directing asteroids towards the planet, because Vulcan gone now, we're back to being on our own. But asteroids would not stop the orcs for too long.
They're like, we do rock better.
So the Imperial Governor or the Astra Militarum General, whoever the heck, right? He turns to the Adeptus Mechanicus. He's like, exterminatus this freaking planet before I lose my marbles, because we can't heckin' get rid of this. Like, there's attack moons consistently gearing up to go bombard Terra. There is prime orcs every other Tuesday, you know? An Imperium just lost a Primarch from our perspective, you know? What the heck? Exterminatus this place. And the Mechanicus was like, but what if in secret we reverse engineer orc teleporter tech?
Well, alright.
They're like, look, you know, it's an orc world. There's a lot of stuff there. They were making moons go across space. We could learn something in a rare stroke of let's learn instead of let's not learn for the Mechanicus.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a strange way for things to be done.
And they reverse engineered the planet. And they teleported it through the warp to a new secret location. This would be the system known as Armageddon.
It's just like, this is someone else's problem now.
Yep. Over the following millennia, the Imperium would be like, oh, look at this world. It's kind of rough, but there was like obviously like civilization here before. Let's colonize it and make it a big industrial hub.
Yep, of course they did.
So Ulanor would eventually become Armageddon.
Alright, yeah.
How's that for the opening of this planet, Jonny? What are your thoughts so far? Talk to me.
It's not every day that you get substantial lore about a rock floating in space, so it's kind of good to see there's some wacky stuff going on.
There is some wacky stuff.
I do like the use of Ulanor and reverse engineering.
Yeah, it's nice to have some connection points between things.
Yeah, it's interesting so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear the smile on your face. But that would take us to Armageddon. What is it? Armageddon
Is a rock.
is a pretty industrialized world. It has a few land masses of a desertous sort of variety. You've got ash wastes, you've got hive cities, you've got big sprawling deserts. There's an equatorial plain of jungle, which is pretty dense. But for the most part, this is like your relatively classic, dusty, dead, industrial hive production world for the Imperium. There is a Astra Militarum regent, that's not the word, regiment that comes from Armageddon. This would be the Armageddon Steel Legion. They used to have miniatures. People want them to come back. With the upcoming Crusade, I don't see why we shouldn't be a little excited for a potential maybe kill team Steel Legion troop. However, the Steel Legion isn't really unique in their troops like the Kriegmen are, or the Cadians. They're more known for the armored vehicles.
Okay. Yep.
They're all about producing artillery, chimera troop transports, some sentinels. That's their big production line. A lot of their actual military foot soldier gear is not so well done, but they make a lot of it. You would have, however, Armageddon Steel Legion stormtroopers, which are comparative to the Cadian Kassakin, but otherwise, these folks are all about armor.
I like these guys.
I'm assuming you're looking up their art or maybe some of their old miniatures.
I'm not, but I like the idea of the armored side of Astra Militarum.
Yeah, you've heard of the paint pot Steel Legion drab, right?
Sure have.
That's these guys.
Sure is.
Heck yeah. First War of Armageddon time. So, many millennia later, Johnny. We are at the year 444, millennia 41.
Okay.
Who is preparing a sort of reunification of their forces to then go out and do some fighting once more?
The Lion.
Go
Rabute
evil.
Gilliman. Oh,
Go
okay.
evil.
Going evil. Alright.
Go evil.
It's a Baden.
No.
Not Daddy Kyle.
Not Daddy Kyle. He does other things at this point of his life. He's getting ready to go bomb Cadia over many failed or not failed crusades. No, this isn't his war zone.
Who the hell is here?
Angron.
Oh, Angry Ron.
Angry Ron is preparing a sort of reunification of the World Eaters following the millennia of not very cohesive forces after Khan betrayed them all at the Battle of Scalathrax. Angron himself is like, hey, I'm ready for a war. Are you ready for a war? And the World Eaters is like, yes! Now, because most of the 40k lore was written in this perpetual, we're in the 40,000s, we're in the 41st millennium, everything's crap, there's usually not a lot of actual lore given between the Heresy era 30k and the modern 40k. Angron perhaps has done this before, but this was one of the first big moments that Angron comes into the 41st millennium and does something.
Okay.
From a lore perspective.
Yep.
Anything else he's done, we just don't really know. But he gathers his forces aboard the space hulk known as the Devourer of Stars. It's made its way into the warp, and he is the conductor of the blood train. He says, all aboard, World Eaters hop on. Cultists hop on. Demons hop on. Angron hops on. The warp draws this space hulk towards the Armageddon system. Remember, it's not just Orky tainted. It's not just Chaos tainted. This is a huge production facility of war armor, vehicles, guns for the Imperium.
Something everyone wants.
Yeah. So, we've touched a little bit upon blood waves and the influence of Khorne via his warp storms in the past. In anticipation of this dread-spreading Hulk, the warp has this sort of rippling effect of Armageddon, and armed rebellions begin to erupt across the various hive cities, causing Imperials to be quite surprised when the World Eaters attack, because for whatever reason, like half of several of the hives and the fortifications people just like, hey, screw you, man, and just starts fighting because of that madness of Khorne starting to take hold as sort of a bit of warp magic or a warp taint ahead of the World Eater's arrival.
Yep.
So they descend. The scattered hives of Armageddon Prime, one half of the main continent supporting life, which is separated by that thick jungle I mentioned earlier, quickly overran as the Chaos Army, featuring Angron himself plus all that I mentioned, as well as demon hosts, mutants, beastmen, and other demonic creatures, descend. The surviving loyalist forces, surviving the uprisings, the World Eaters and their friends, they flee Armageddon Prime, and they traverse through the super dense jungle towards Armageddon Secundus for a last-ditch effort, as approximately half of the PDFs still surviving are converted to chaos, and the World Eaters butcher millions in the first weeks.
That seems like World Eater style.
Now, naturally, this wouldn't be a war zone without some Imperium defenders.
So who comes to the aid?
You tell me.
Is this where the Grey Knights show up?
It is this war, but they are not here just yet.
Not yet.
Think Fourth War for Armageddon teaser, Johnny.
Space Wolves.
The Space Wolves and their chapter master Logan Grimnar, or Santa Claus if you will, arrive. This is a system that's sort of within their region of space to defend and look out for. Pretty much all Space Marine chapters are assigned to specific regions of space, with the exception of the crusading fleets of like Black Templars and so forth. This is Space Wolf territory. They come and help the defenders organize a counterattack as the nearby warp storms decide to be a little prank-like and go away for a bit. And Angron and the World Eaters and all that kind of lose a bit of that zany bloodlust. They're a little dulled, They don't have quite as much juice. So they're like, fine, we'll wait. We'll wait for Khorne to come back.
Yep.
But that's just Khorne allowing the Imperium forces to get a defense so that there will be a bloody war on both sides,
Bloody Khorne. He knows what he's doing, eh?
You would think, eh?
He does not care from whence blood flows.
That's my boy. So, Angron's eventual continuation of conquest takes him and his forces to seek out the Armageddon Secundus hives. But as they cross through the jungles, the Space Wolves reveal their hand. The wolves, however significantly outnumbered, they frickin' charge the World Eater horde. They hop in their tanks, their land raiders, their rhinos, maybe their flying sleds pulled by wolves, I don't know. They charge the flippin' World Eaters, and they're winning. They are so aggressive that they inflict heavy losses before withdrawing, only to be luring the World Eaters who are like, get them! They lure them into an ambush with all the Armageddon Steel Legion just like sitting on the opposite side of this kill zone with all their tanks and, las rifle, fellows. They're just waiting. They're like, the wolves said they'll lead them this way. And that they did. And then with even more casualties on the World Eaters front, the wolves are like, all right, let's go back in. And they charge once more into the World Eaters, back into this massive river system that cuts through the jungles. And it's just World Eaters and Space Wolves and the occasional Militarum tanks just having a ginormous brawl. And this goes on for hours as Chaos is frenzied, the Space Wolves are frenzied, and they're just dishing it out.
Nice.
But you may notice that I never mentioned any of the Force commanders.
You sure didn't.
What do you think Angron's doing right now?
I imagined he would be on the front line. That's what Angron does, but apparently he's not there, so...
Where is he?
He's looking for Logan Grimnar.
In a sense, yes. Angron and his bodyguard, the Cruor Praetoria. Do you know who the Cruor Praetoria are?
Considering we have a World Eaters player, you'd think I did, but no. I assume they're just like the 8-bound.
Well, the Cruor Praetoria are a personal bodyguard of Angron of, I think at the time it was 12 bloodthirsters.
Oh. Angron has bloodthirsters for friends?
Sure did. Let me just double check, because I'm pretty sure it's 8 now, but I think it was 12. Yes, it was a force of 12 highly esteemed bloodthirsters, acting as Angron's personal bodyguard during the First War.
Hot damn. 12 is a lot of bloodletters.
Freaking bloodthirsters.
That's illegal.
12.
Sorry. You can only have 6.
Yeah. But Angron and the Crua Praetoria head towards some of the big Hive cities. Hive Infernus, Hive Hell's Reach. But Logan Grimnar and the River Defenders, who are sort of, over with the others. Logan Grimnar's sort of, actually with the Space Wolves, just kind of back a bit because he's on the phone.
He's on the phone.
He's kind of been using the Space Wolves to stall chaos because he's on the phone and he's trying real hard to reach a very secret planet known only to chapter masters and high-ranking inquisitors and some other important individuals. Who lives on Titan, Johnny? And don't say Titans.
It was tempting, I won't lie. This is where we get our friends in grey.
The Grey Knights are summoned because Grimnar's like, yeah, I can't deal with this.
Yeah, if I saw Angron and 12 Bloodthirsters, I would definitely be like, yeah, backup is necessary. Or I'd be like,
Absolutely.
Let's retreat and just virus bomb this planet.
So, in lore, a singular Grey Knight is considered like a level 20 D&D paladin,
Yeah.
This individual cares not about demons. They will win. They are incorruptible. They are individually a very powerful psyker, as well as being like a space marine who is next level space marine. Do you know the gene seed implanted in Grey Knights to give them the space marine like wake up moment?
Don't they have Big Boy Daddy E's gene seed?
They do. They have a reconstructed Big E gene seed in them.
Called the Begin seed.
Sure.
That's not. That was terrible.
It was. But the Grey Knights themselves, because they love teleportation, they deployed directly into an assault on Angron and the Bloodthirsters. 109 Grey Knight Terminators deployed at once.
6 inches away, I imagine.
Probably. So, at this point, Angron is wielding a blade known as the Black Blade. The Black Blade, well, that's hard to say quickly. Black Blade, there we go.
Is it just a black sword?
It is something the Dark Mechanicum created in the Horus Heresy, and I'm pretty sure it's like every time you kill somebody, it absorbs their soul and gets stronger.
Oh, that seems like power creep on a level that Angron must love.
Sure did. Angron would do one swipe of his sword and slay several Grey Knights at once instantly. But one Grey Knight, he's super strong with his brain. He uses his big brain and manages to crack the blade itself with psychic powers before just like booping it with his hammer. However, the overall force commander of the Grey Knights was killed personally by Angron, but he did the classic, hey, stab me so I can get close to you.
He did the old wrench himself down the blade.
Yeah, but doing so was so he could finish the incantation the Grey Knights had started, which would banish Angron back to the warp. And they succeeded.
Nice.
The Grey Knights managed to banish Angron outside of real space into the warp for 100 years and 1 day. But only 13 Grey Knights survived alongside all the Imperium forces that also survived. 13 Grey Knights remained of 109.
World Leader's got to feel good about that. That's some pretty good win rate.
And the Crua Praetoria lost 4 members.
And then there were 8.
Now, what think you about these conflicts, Johnny?
A lot of death. Khorne must love it.
Absolutely.
The Space Wolves, I assume, have taken a fair few losses at this point, as have World Eaters.
Yeah.
Losing 4 Bloodthirsters seems like a pretty big deal.
And they would be true death, because Grey Knights know the true names of demons, which is the power over these warp entities, is to be like, hey, Jerry! And Jerry looks at you like, wait a minute, he knows it.
Ah.
And then Jerry was no more.
There's no returning. And then the morale hit must be pretty big, so I assume the World Eaters start to form a retreat at this point because Daddy's gone.
They did, but that's not the cruel twist that you would expect to occur as the finishing remarks of this conflict.
Okay.
And I don't think you are going to expect it, but give me your wildest idea on what cruel twist the Imperial forces placed upon Armageddon following this conflict. Let's not even worry about the World Eaters. They're gone. They're out of here.
They killed everyone because any threat of a cult is enough for them to wipe out the entire planet.
I like where you're heading. I have a bit of a blurb here that I'm paraphrasing. In a cruel twist, the Inquisition and Grey Knights sterilized the population and placed them into work camps, and the planet was recolonized with people with no knowledge about the conflict. Orbiting Navy and Mechanicus ships were shot down, as well as Imperial Guard troops escorting survivors on their ships. Several billion people were put to the sword of exterminatus across nearby planets to halt the spread of knowledge regarding both chaos and of the Grey Knights. The Space Wolves themselves went into a protracted civil war with the Inquisition over this treatment of the populations, almost being declared traitors themselves, and going up against the Grey Knights personally.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You can't let anyone know the Grey Knights exist because they're the secret special forces, and you also can't let the world know that demons exist, so anyone who has seen or heard of demons or the Grey Knights must be expunged from reality.
Those exterminatus planets I mentioned, they weren't exactly, the target number one. They were the target after the Space Wolves were like, hey, everybody, look what they're doing. And the Inquisition's like, hey, were you talking to the Space Wolves?
It's like, you doomed everyone.
And that's the first war for Armageddon.
All right. One down, two more to go, eh?
Well, the following two conflicts are a little more simpler. I mean, that was pretty simple. World Eaters vs. Space Wolves and Friends. The other two conflicts do have more about them, but it's a lot of the same stuff. I will talk about the highlights, but it's really the first war that most people aren't actually all that aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The second and third war you see in art, you see in books such as Hell's Reach, where the Black Templars are fighting within the third war for Armageddon. Generally speaking, fans of the lore know a decent amount of the second and third wars, but let's get into them nonetheless. 500 years pass from the first war of Armageddon. Armageddon's recolonized, it's resettled, and it's back to thriving, Some of the commanders have like a very tight-lipped knowledge about the first war, but the majority of the planet is very ignorant. Like they have hunches because, there's a smoking ruin over there, and there's a weird chaos relic in the forest we're not allowed to go near, stuff like that. But we have the second war for Armageddon, but it doesn't exactly start its focus on Armageddon. It starts with the rise of Ghazghkull Thraka. Ghazghkull Thraka had humble beginnings. He was a boy got shot, one of the mad docs of the orcs, had a bit of an experimentation, plugging him up with cybernetics and all of that stuff, bionics that tap into the somewhat psychic nature of the orcs. But Ghazghkull wasn't coming back to life, so he was just dumped in the bin with all the other failures, right? We have a grot named Makari, however, who was assisting this mad doc Grotsnik, who went and was poking all the bodies just to, doubly check that they aren't coming back, only for Ghazghkull to wake up. And through his eyes, Makari glimpses the prophecy granted to him by Gork and Mork. Years would pass as Ghazghkull, on the planet he was upon, started to unite the various forces. There was essentially a clan for each of the big six. He gained Warboss Bullets of the Death Skull, for example. Warboss Grudbolg, Shazfrag, Snazdaka of the Red Skulls. No, Evil Sons. Red Skulls is not an orc. You get where I'm going with that. He's like, we're gonna go on a war! And this was before he has his big miniature that we have nowadays. This was when he had his old miniature. He's sort of just a big knob. He's not a huge hulking mega knob, but like mega. No, he's just big knob. He basically is like, everybody, we're getting on these space hulks that are just in orbit, and we're gonna ride it and see where it goes.
Wherever we go, there is war.
They hopped into the warp. On the way, they had a bit of an appetizer. They got to fight off hundreds of demons. And then as they arrived, funnily enough, in the Armageddon system, because they're kind of drawn to, like, once more, the orky aura of Ulanor and all of the war. They're just drawn to it like moths to a flame. On the day of the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, which is a big holiday in the Imperium calendars, in the initial landing of Orc Rocks, the Space Hulk Claw of Desolation simply fell on Hive Ulfern and destroyed it. And that was the start of the Second War of Armageddon. No one really knew they were coming because the warp was funky and cut off a lot of communication outside and inside the system. And then there be orcs.
I love that.
Now, the opening moments of the Orc War is your kind of standard stuff. You have the orcs pushing out from their initial landing forces, taking some of the lesser known hives around the planet, right? You've obviously got generals of varying efficiencies. The Overlord of Armageddon, Hermann von Straub, for example, was completely inept at his job. It's just orcs, who cares? We deal with these things all the time. We can take it. He sends, forces over to defend this hive only for, them to die. Oh, we can hold them at this force. No, you can't. We can go over there. It's not that bad. No, it isn't. Just, inept government.
Yeah.
And so the orcs start to take all this ground. But one man unites a lot of the forces of Hive Hades. And this is when a lot of the orky interest really picks up. They're like, hey, that's one tough opponent. We're not getting into that hive, so let's try harder. Who is in charge of Hive Hades, Johnny? You've said him before.
Is this where he shows up? Yarrick's here.
Sebastian Yarrick, the Commissar known for his defense of Hive Hades, ignores a lot of these orders from high above. He's like, you know what? No. We have orbiting satellites and ships being shot from the sky. We have hives that are being overrun. We've got Titan legions and Militarum regiments falling across the planet. I'm going to ignore you, and I'm going to do my own thing.
Man, that's some heresy, right?
Yeah. And that's what really kicks off the big, we love War for Armageddon because of all these various little Warzone vignettes that prop up. Armageddon is also a mildly volcanic planet, and there is a season upon the planet known as the Season of Shadows, where the volcanoes are like, it's our time now, boom, boom, and kind of smog the planet with volcanic ash, and they blot the sky, and, well, you understand volcanoes.
Yeah, yep.
They call it the Season of Shadows, and this occurred within days of the orcs invading the planet.
Not by any planning on the orcs' part, but just pure dumb luck.
Yeah. So you'd have the Legio Metallica and Skitarii forces versing, orc titans and millions of orc infantry, but it's not, a winnable fight. So you have, titans detonating their cores and, self-destructing to take down even more orc titans before they're obviously pulled down. The Imperial forces are, positioning themselves along the various rivers and, garrisoning different hives. But of course you've got, the Orc Speed Freaks taking on the Desert Plains. You've got the Orc Blood Axes sending their commandos to take out the various hive leaders. It's not going so well.
Yeah, sounds pretty messy.
Yeah, Hive Hades is some of like the hardest fighting though. But Commissar Yarrick is a man possessed of indomitable will, you know? And this guy was not sleeping much. He would, order all of the gates and blast shields of Hive Hades to shut and basically become a giant bomb shelter. He himself would negotiate treaties with the many gangs of the Hive, essentially forming a big ragtag militia. He's got PDF, he's got gangers, he's got some guardsman forces. All the while, Orc Gargants are pounding at the gates. Orcs are starting to infiltrate with like commandos and stuff. You have stupid man Hermann von Straub deciding to tinker with virus bombs and stuff like that into the desert to halt the Orcs, only to be failing at that too. But Hive Hades and Hive Hell's Reach were putting up work, Yarrick was rationing people on rats and roaches and generator power. He would send engineers strapped with bombs into the various pipe wing that commandos were sneaking in, and they would halt the advance of commandos with suicidal bombers. They would have Orc Gargants, outside the gate, so he would send like mining equipment loaded with bombs to go blow them up. He was just doing a scrappy skirmish inside and just outside this hive.
He was making do with the resources at his disposal.
Yeah. You have Hive Hell's Reach hearing about Hive Hades' resistance and getting like inspired. Like morale was, hopping up to the point where, Port Hell's Reach was observing like cargo lifters where the pilots would actually weld themselves into the loading cranes, like closing the doors, strapping themselves in. So no matter what happens, they are in their cockpit. And they would turn these massive cargo loaders and cranes into like random person, like fake Imperial Knights going up against like the Orc Gargants, just like port workers in their cranes going and punching like the Gargant Orc walkers as they got near. It was scrappy.
Yeah, sure was.
And then Ghazghkull arrived.
Oh no, all of this is before Ghazghkull.
Yeah. But he arrived at Hive Hades. He's like, this human's a real smart one, eh? Talking about Yarrick. He's like, our commandos are dying. Our things are getting blown up. We can't get inside. What's that about?
Mm-hmm.
But this was buying the Imperium enough time for Space Marines to arrive.
Of course it was.
But the Space Marines weren't particularly noteworthy in the conflict other than just being Space Marines. Like, a group goes over there and wins the river back. A group goes over there and defends the hive,
Yeah, yep.
But a chapter master of repute does arrive on the planet and take over command of all Imperial forces. Guess who?
Is it Lorgar Grimnar again?
No. Who do you think?
Dude, you're asking me questions about Space Marines. How am I supposed to know who's who?
Dante of the Blood Angels.
Oh, different legion. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Dante of the Blood Angels arrives. He finds that Hermann von Straub guy and he's like, you suck, dude. I'm taking control. Von Straub was like, nah, I don't think so. And then tries to flee the hive in a land speeder, which is then shot down, but no one ever found his body.
Oh, wow. Okay, all right. He just gets murked.
Yeah. The completely inept governor just had his comeuppance.
Well, that's a positive.
But by this point, like, food is super scarce. Supply lines between hives are now just like food trucks because there's no food left. By this point, like, Commissar Yarrick is struggling to keep morale up inside Hive Hades as bombs and guns and stuff continue to assail the Hive. Ghazghkull Thraka, decides to join the actual ground fighting, but Space Marines are there and they, seem to, get rid of Ghazghkull, but maybe not really. It's hard to tell in all of the conflict. But basically, the Imperial forces did get an upper hand and managed to push back the Orcs so much that, the Ghazghkull Thraka warlord and his bodyguard managed to hop aboard a Space Hulk and slip away somehow. They're like, oh, this fight's over. I'm leaving.
Yep.
Commissar Yarrick was eventually found in Hive Hades, surrounded by dozens of Orc corpses, but he had, taken off. Well, I don't think he took off his arm, but his arm had been removed and replaced with an Orc power claw.
So this is where he gets the power claw. I wasn't sure if he'd get it here or if that would be the next war or some shit.
Yeah, again, indomitable force of will. This guy loses an arm, kills an Orc. He's like, fine, I'll use yours. And I'm not sure if it's the Orky power of imagination or if maybe Yarrick's arm was okay and he just grabbed a power claw, but power claws aren't lightweight tools, so I'm inclined to believe it's the Orcs being like, oh my gosh, by Gorky, he's one of us.
Some crazy stuff, yep.
And in the you'll love the footnote at the end of the general conflict. All of this war that's happening is predominantly Armageddon south, south of the equator.
Yeah.
In the north, an Inquisitor arrives with a huge mercenary force in defense of the planet. His mercenaries were like most of the residences of the mining world of Golgotha, a squat world, or a League of Votan nowadays world.
Oh, okay, alright.
Remember, this is 3rd edition lore.
This was before the squats got murked.
In the modern lore, squats have been lightly retconned to be one of the many leagues of the Votan, except the squats themselves were gobbled by the Tyranids.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, the squats were able to, come along and help out. They were taking their infamous land trains across the deserts of Armageddon and just fighting. And that was essentially the second war for Armageddon.
So what's the big cliffhanger for this war? Did everyone get murked again?
No, Ghazghkull survived, but he decided to say to his Grot Makari, "Oi, this one was the practice run."
Give us a moment, we'll come back.
But he was posturing because actually he's starting to feel a bit sick, Mr. Ghazghkull. His sickness was the constant headache from the meddling of one Commissar Yarrick. Ghazghkull had migraines.
Oh,
he would be like,
man.
He'd be like, I tried to take the hive, but he was ready. I tried to do this and he was right there. Some would say I'm the best orc, but then Yarrick might be the best human. He's a good opponent. I like fighting him.
But the whole time he's actually, I didn't win.
Yeah. He's gonna come back and he's gonna beat him next time,
Now, we have a bit of an interlude between War 2 and War 3, but tell me, what did you think of War 2?
War 2 is the war that I recognize from people talking. The big Ghazghkull versus Yarrick confrontation.
Absolutely.
But it's got me curious how they're meant to do War 3 without it just being more of the same.
Well, would you look at that? War 3 is more of the same.
Alright, here we go.
So,
Armageddon War 2.5.
War 3 takes place approximately 7 years later, but the Second War never really ended because it's incredibly difficult to get rid of orcs. But the Third War happens when Ghazghkull eventually is like, fine, I'll come back.
How's my boy Yarrick doing?
Well, sorry, I cannot read dates. This was 57 years after the Second War of Armageddon.
Oh, okay, so Yarrick's now an old man.
Absolutely. Now, Ghazghkull Thraka fled the planet after War 2. Commissar Yarrick was pissed at this fellow. He hears that Ghazghkull went away. He's like, that's the MF that did this whole thing, right? Like, that's the guy. And so Yarrick actually, like, leaves the planet in pursuit and basically follows, like, the squats, or is going with the squats back to their planet Golgotha, because that's where Ghazghkull flees to. He's like, all right, well, you know, I'm on the back foot, but if I can take over this planet, all them other war bosses will realize I'm the biggest orc, you know?
Yeah, I mean, losing a fight's pretty bad for your rep in orc society, right?
Yeah, so he tries and, you know, takes out Golgotha and does a fairly good job. But along the way, you know, he has to deal with the Dark Angels at another planet. You know, the Orc forces are being hit and run by Commissar Yarrick. You know, there's a lot of scraps. But Yarrick pursues him and eventually gets caught by Ghazghkull and is, like, super tortured.
As opposed to regular torture.
Well, he's super tortured because Ghazghkull, instead of like, oi, hear me, blam, he's like, hang on a minute, you's a smart one. You put up a good fight. I like fighting you. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you go back to Armageddon and get ready for another round. You're too much fun. That's a direct quote.
Oh no.
He says, Commissar Yarrick is too much fun to fight. I can't kill him now. There's a good fight we could have.
Orcs, man, orcs.
And in this sort of interlude, he's kind of humming and hawing, you know? Grot Makari is basically like, please, sir, don't go back to Armageddon. It's not worth it. That's not the prophecy that Gork and Mork told you. And then Ghazghkull had a lot of like, shut up, and would just routinely kill Makari. But Makari is also blessed by the orc gods and would just like come back to life as a different Grot. You would have Grot Steve or Grot Harry. As soon as Grot Makari was killed, Grot Steve or Grot Harry is now Makari.
Oh, okay.
And then he would go back to Ghazghkull. He's like, Ghazghkull, please! We can't fight Armageddon again. We got other fights to do. We got to unite all the other orcs. And Ghazghkull will be like, just shut up! And then blam, you know?
Murder him again, yep.
Yeah. But, you know, that's orcs for you. Ghazghkull would rally many other war bosses, some of the ones that were with him in the Second War, plus some new ones, including a fellow known as the Overfiend of Octarius.
The Overfiend of Octarius. What a name.
Yep. Overfiend of Octarius is a legitimate orc entity who is in control of the orcs of Octarius.
Entity? You're saying he's not himself an orc?
Much like the beast, whenever the Overfiend of Octarius dies, there's another one.
It's orc perpetuals.
I mean, in title, but not in personage.
Yeah. They're mushrooms. They just resprout.
Yeah, but along the way, Ghazghkull gets a good friend in one of the various mech boys who is particularly known for teleporter technology. And with, you know, all these new allies, you know, well, look at that. There's a bunch of orc stuff teleporting into, you know, the Armageddon system. Gee whiz.
Yet again.
And orc kill cruisers, spelt with K's.
Yeah, of course, it's
would
orcs.
Suicidal rush into Imperial Navy blockades. You know, monitor stations would have barely any warning as these orc fleets would pop in and be like, hello, bonk. And the orc invasion would begin anew. But Yarrick, who was given a head start because he was too much fun to kill and was let go, had assembled Imperial Guard, Titanic Legions, Sisters of Battle, over 20 Space Marine chapters. He's like, come on, let's get ready. Most of the Black Templars had, you know, even arrived, and they're like 10,000 strong.
Nice.
Yep.
They're like, we know this threat is coming. Let's actually be prepared this time.
So this time, instead of just going straight for the surface and dropping a spaceship on a hive, the orcs spent several weeks in orbit just kill cruising into spaceships and letting the defenders on the ground get set up. Because what's a good scrap if they're not ready for you, you know?
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, so all the civilians on the world, and keep in mind 57 years is enough time to have like new generations.
Yeah.
People who weren't there for the previous war to be like,
What is this?
I don't know about this, guys. But by now, the Armageddon Steel Legion had pretty much baked in a combat doctrine of fighting orcs. They were particularly adept now at doing so after the previous war and 50-ish years of chasing orc remnants across their planet.
Mm-hmm.
But hundreds of orc rocks started to smash into Armageddon. Ghazghkull, who's a bit of a spiteful lad, dropped the biggest one on Hive Hades, and then that hive was no more.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, he's like, man, I had too much of a headache the last time. Let's just get rid of it ahead of time.
Here's some painkillers. Do you have some ibuprofen? I have a headache.
But the orc landers, Johnny, slowed down as they started to hit the planet. There wasn't just big asteroid bomber. Nope. Several of the orc rocks were equipped with retrofitted booster rockets. As they would hit the surface, they actually slowed down and touched down upon as landers. Inside the various rocks were an immense amount of gargants.
Oh. Thought you were going to say orcs, not just gargants.
Gargants and orcs. The teleporter technology managed to keep them nice and secure in transit through the system and then onto the planet's surface. This was technology designed by a mech boy known as Archimedes.
I love that. Archimedes.
Archimedes, because according to the orcs, this third war for Armageddon, Johnny, was going to be their Ragnarok.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Ghazghkull's given me a headache.
So, in the opening wars, you had Titans and Gargants beyond number engaged in the ash wastes, just duking it out. You had feral orcs emerging from the equatorial jungles, but Hive Acheron, who had survived fairly well in the Second War, then fell to the orcs without warning, as an inside coup occurred. The infamous war criminal Hermann von Straub, the former governor of Armageddon, whose previous leadership was super bad, had overthrown the Hive in cooperation with the orcs and now ruled it as the overlord of Hive Acheron.
Why? I don't understand this human suddenly just being like, sure,
He's an insecure twat.
Oh, man. Humies.
Naturally, following that, Yarrick had to defend Armageddon. He coordinated all the various forces, a big unstoppable force of men and iron and steel, knowing full well that Ghazghkull would be here and he wouldn't be effing around. He had Space Marine chapters deployed in very strategic places, yada hoop, but this guy was like nearing 100 years old.
Dude's getting on in his years.
And Imperial medical stuff does have a lot of like rejuvenation drugs. You stay nice and youthful. But this guy's still old. He's been fighting this whole bloody time,
Yeah, he's been fighting for the last 60 years just against these orcs.
I have an interesting footnote about Hermann von Straub, which is going to be a tie-in to our next episode.
Okay.
Hermann von Straub would be hunted down and killed by a unit of Penal Legion troopers known as the Last Chances.
I have never heard of them.
The Last Chances, again, a Penal Legion, so all your criminals and stuff like that.
Yeah. Suicide Squad.
Were kind of a Suicide Squad force that had their own trilogy of novels in the early 2000s. And it's that early 2000s super cheese Warhammer storytelling. But I don't think I've had more fun reading a wiki entry than with these guys. I am so in love with their narrative. that I'm not even going to tell you about them. They're going to get their own episode.
Bet.
But they took out the guy. And then Armageddon's funky volcanic weather happened. You had warfare in the equatorial jungles. You had the Inquisition and some space marines fighting chaos inside the jungle, because in the first war, some of the various things that Angron and his friends destroyed had slowly began to build up chaos taint. And they discovered that there was very small warp gates starting to formulate throughout the jungle.
Oh, no.
Where the World Eaters had mustered in the first war for Armageddon.
Things are getting complicated.
There were orcs and World Eaters from the previous wars that had been stuck in a effy-weffy, time vortex and were time displaced. So during this third war for Armageddon, you had Black Templars still fighting World Eaters that had kind of started to creep through. Yeah, it's a little messy. You have other battles such as Gitana Bay, where the Angels Porphyr chapter of Space Marines basically grabbed all 20-ish of their dreadnoughts and built a wall for them to stand on, and were hold the line. And were almost all, destroyed until, the last. And then they realized it wasn't actually that bad. They only lost half of the dreadnoughts. But it was that moment of we're not surviving this, so just stand there and keep shooting.
Oh, damn.
But the orcs were pushed back. The World Eaters had been pushed back. The war for Armageddon continued. The Black Templars had their whole Hive Hell's Reach novel, which I highly recommend, by the way. Even though it's a Space Marine book, this really puts you into the heart of the battle and how dire these things were. The whole storyline is, Chaplain Grimaldus, who has a miniature now, trying his damnedest to reconcile the fact he's been left to die in this conflict and still has to be a spiritual counselor for his fellows who are one by one dying because there's just too many orcs.
Tough gig.
It's tough gig, but Ghazghkull Thraka, the bloody fellow, was hunted down by other Black Templars across the planet. The war for Armageddon raged. The orcs called it the Big Scrap or Ragnarok, as I mentioned earlier. Human death toll spiraled. Armageddon should not fall, however, so it didn't matter. They kept fighting. And eventually, because they weren't winning super easily, Ghazghkull was like, "All right, Makari, I'm bored. Let's go."
Just up and leaves.
Yeah, he's like, yeah. He turns to Makari, he's like, "Man,
I'm sorry."
He started to lose his way, and Makari kind of would poke him with a stick. "It's okay, boss. You're just doing your best. But, remember the prophecy? You're the prophet." And Ghazghkull's like,
"Yes, we're going to leave this planet and we're going to begin the Great War. We're going to make the war great again."
Nice reference. I hated it.
Not a good reference, but that's essentially what he did. He said, "This war, nothing war. We're going to have an even better war, a bigger war. You're going to have war forever."
Nice.
With Armageddon once again pretty crippled, he's like, "All right, peace out," and left. He said sorry to Makari, scooped him up in his big hand probably, put him on his shoulder because he's cute like that, and then they left. They went to other war zones, including the war zone where the Space Wolf Ragnar Blackmane would be like, "There he is," and goes and beheads Ghazghkull, only for Mad Doc Grotznik to go snip snip and put him into the big body that he has now.
Nice.
But that's more or less the third war for Armageddon. There's less big things of note because, again, this was a campaign that you could play with your mates on the tabletop. It could go either way. You had a very small 32-page codex supplement in paperback that had references to the conflict, army showcase, some rules to run Black Templar, orcs, Steel Legion. They had 4 faction supplements plus lore plus showcase in a 32-page book with missions.
Man, that's super good.
That's new.
Good value.
And except for the finishing aspect of the Third War for Armageddon, that's all I really have to tell you about it.
Cool. All right, well, let's wrap it up then.
Yeah. So, what do we know? We know that Ghazghkull Thraka leaves Armageddon to launch the Great War. Hermann von Straub, dead. Yarrick, potentially dead. We don't know for sure, but it's largely suggested this was the conflict that he eventually kicks the bucket.
Has GW not said that Yarrick is dead and in a tomb? Like, his body has been...
It's a question mark.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I feel like they were talking about that in that last reveal we watched, where people were asking if Yarrick would come back, and they were like, no, Yarrick is dead. Let him die.
Well, if I open up Lexicanum, the end of the Third War for Armageddon, it says, after much pursuit, Yarrick and Black Templar Boy were able to finally catch up to Ghazghkull. However, while they were able to corner his flagship Killwrecker in the ensuing Battle of the Haunted Gulf, Ghazghkull was able to escape into the warp and begin the Great War. When Yarrick saw the Orc warlord vanish, he slumped and knew that his escape meant ill for the galaxy. Recently, now this is after the Third War for Armageddon, it has been rumored that Yarrick is dead. The Bell of Lost Souls on Terra is said to have rung for him, but the exact details of his fate are unclear. Death at the hands of Ghazghkull or a returned Angron have been proposed. There is also speculation that he is not dead at all.
Alright. I was under the impression he was dead and buried.
You would think so, but the Third War for Armageddon happened in 998, Millennia 41. Now, the war raged into a period known as the Blackness. At some point, Johnny, the Great Rift opens up. Nearly half of all the worlds of the Imperium are cut off from one another. Armageddon itself isolated, and reinforcements en route were sent into oblivion as the Great Rift consumed them. As a warp surge had a funny little tickle of the planet, demons started to crop up along the planet. The Red Gate that heralded Angron's arrival the first time starts to do its things again. The Salamanders chapter halt Angron's return, but the various planet gets partially terraformed by the war into a bit of a hellscape. The Imperial forces, still fighting off the Orc remnants, now have a third, faction to contend with. The planet becomes unstable. The warp forces start to transform Armageddon. All the broken spaceships and Orc rocks littering the orbit start to collapse into the planet as meteors. Chaos starts to get its wind back in its sails. Angron's going to come back. It's going to be the fourth war for Armageddon.
It's actually a pretty good little introduction to it. It sounds like a lot of fun.
That's the tail end of the Third War for Armageddon. There is a bit of a battle that I think was put out in Astra Militarum 9th edition Codex, which, there's the Steel Legion fighting off a bunch of Chaos Space Marine forces in one of the outlying hives. They realize they're not going to win, but they fight just long enough to hold them off and then blow up the hive or blow up something to let the Imperial forces know Chaos is back. Whatever has just dealt a terrible hand to the galaxy is already here. We do not have time to recover. We have to keep fighting. Only now, it's chaos as well.
Nice.
And we'll talk about the Fourth War for Armageddon sometime in the future, my friend.
Pretty keen. Sounds like it's going to be a pretty interesting Crusade supplement.
Yeah. Let's debrief, Johnny. I've spoken a lot, but I want to hear your thoughts on all these various wars and characters and happenings. You talk for a while. I need to stop.
Well, War 1 sounds like an absolute blast. Sounds like a lot of fun. There were some pretty big named characters involved. Obviously, being a novel as opposed to active gameplay really helps with that, right? You can really feel the way it was fleshed out more than the following ones. War 2 and 3 kind of felt like the same thing with a small interlude. I say small, like it wasn't 50 years.
Yeah.
But in all things considered, there's not a lot to note from those wars that affected the surrounding area. Angron showing up in the first war is a pretty big deal. Killing 4 bloodthirsters is a pretty big deal. Murdering a significant portion of the reinforcements of Grey Knights, pretty big deal. Knowing that from what spoilers we have seen in that recent show, we know that it's kind of gonna be a similar fight to the first one, but kind of reversed. Instead of it being Grey Knights reinforcing Space Wolves, it's Space Wolves reinforcing Grey Knights. I'm curious to see if the Orcs make a show in this next war. Maybe Ghazghkull's like, hey, I'm back. You can't fight on Armageddon without me.
That would be hilarious.
It definitely would be hilarious. But I'm really excited to see all of these different war fronts getting an update on what's happening recently with like Nukmund and now Armageddon. And honestly, I'd like a couple more before the end of this edition. Just like really push the narrative forward.
Yeah, like an Octarius maybe.
Yeah, just to see what's going on in these sections that we've heard the name of, but for some of us newer guys, we don't know what's happened in the past. And I think with the big boom that 40k has had in recent years, it's kind of a good time to give those updates on what's going on. Plus it gives us content, right? But yeah, overall I'm kind of excited. I think it was a fun showing and a fun retelling of the events of Armageddon.
Thanks, man. I tried.
I did not know that Armageddon was originally a different planet and a different system that was just teleported here.
And that planet.
And that specific one, like, it's a pretty big deal.
What do you think of the big characters of Armageddon? We're not going to talk about High Marshal. No, that's not his name. Yes, well, there's High Marshal Helbrecht, but there's also Reclusiarch Grimoldus, Black Templar characters. I'm purposely not going too much into them because they are cool enough for their own stuff. But like Yarrick, Gaz, Hermann von Straub, no, don't worry about him. What do you think about the whole Yarrick v Gaz thing?
I was already aware that it was a pretty big deal in the community. Like, a lot of people are like, Yarrick's the man. But I didn't really understand exactly why, because I didn't know much of the conflict. He definitely feels like he has plot armor.
Yeah.
But I really liked seeing Ghazghkull just, like, show up, be like, hey, let's start a scrap. I wasn't too big on the fact that he would just retreat with very little reason. It was kind of just like, oh, this isn't going our way, let's just leave. But, I mean, you need an Imperial win in those days, right?
Yeah. Commissar Yarrick had a model released originally in 1992. His power claw looked a bit like a crab hand, but he has a cool-ass banner. His miniature was updated in 2000, as in the year 2000, to have a more orcish-looking power claw. It says here that in the aftermath of the Second War, he replaces missing hand, okay, so not an arm, but a hand, with the same power claw that had taken it, specifically modified to fit his arm. Powerful enough now to kill in one swipe. And after hearing rumors from the orcs that he could kill with a glance, because he's so good at his job, he had his missing eye, replaced with a bionic replacement, the Bale Eye, that can fire a laser beam, similar in effect to a las pistol at close range.
Alright, this guy doesn't have plot armor. He has, we made a character that the community liked, so we made him better armor.
He has also got his own tank, but I'm not going to ask you to look at it because that's something I want to surprise you with later on. I have a quote to take us out of the episode that's from our man Yarrick himself.
Alright.
Heroes of Armageddon, you have withstood the evil savagery of the orcs, and they have nothing left for you to fear. So raise high the black banners of vengeance Now is our time. That was Yarrick during the Third War.
Sick. Dude's got a bit of charisma.
All right. That's our episode. Next week, I'm going to tell you about the Last Chances. Any closing remarks?
No, I think that sounds really cool. They sound like a really neat group, and I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you read Fulgrim. Jonny, you take us home, eh?
I hope you all have a lovely time hobbying. It's been lovely chatting, and we look forward to the next episode. Make sure you follow Insta if you want to know when we upload. Things have been a little weird with me changing jobs at the moment, so we were hoping to get back into the swing of things as routines start to settle. But we're here to stay, and we're here to keep doing this, so enjoy, and we look forward to seeing and hearing from you all real soon.
We'll crump you later.